Hey everyone, welcome to Aerobic AF. I'm Ken.
And I'm Quinlan. We're pumped you're here. This is your home for running, fitness, and all things hybrid training.
New episodes drop weekly wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
And don't forget to connect with us on our Instagram at aerobicafpod.
What if your fitness isn't the thing holding you back? Your mind is. Welcome to Aerobic AF Pod. Q, we both had races where we felt physically strong but mentally cracked. And on the flip side, have had races where we probably overperformed because we stayed mentally locked in. That's the topic today. But mentality versus physical fitness in racing and how much influence the mental part of the game has on ultimately your finish time.
Yeah, this is something that you hear a lot, not just in social media, but from, professional athletes who say it's not all physical, it's mental. And I do think it's one of those things you almost need to experience to believe, because to an average person looking at an elite athlete, it's like, well, obviously you're very physically fit, so it's not just mental. But I think something that we've talked a lot about and maybe are realizing ourselves is that oftentimes your mental ceiling is higher than your physical ceiling. And so even with the same physical fitness, you can perform better if your mentality is more dialed or more locked in. And so in those instances, it is all mental. And you need to have a baseline competency in physical fitness, but yeah, you got to get the mind right to really perform.
I think the longer that I do this, the more I realize how much the mental game actually matters the most. I've had races, like a couple of my races actually in recent memory, that have actually gone really badly just because I wasn't mentally locked in. And when you're not locked in, mistakes happen. They could be execution errors in the race, they can be pacing errors. It could just take you completely out of the game. Not to mention, everything takes energy. So when you're just, especially in a race that's already very physically taxing, such as a high rocks, and also is very mentally demanding, you're trying to navigate the stations, you're trying to make sure that you're counting the correct laps, all of that's taking energy. So you really need to make sure that you're focused and being efficient in the way that you're thinking about the race and the way that you're approaching the race in that regard. And if you start to slip there, the wheels can totally fall off the bus. And I know that's happened to both of us.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you want to, hone in on that in your training a little bit so you understand how to win those mental battles, even though they're going to be smaller in training. Like on race day, if you lose the mental battle, it's really difficult to climb out of that hole. And so yeah, that's really where we feel like, when it gets tough, when you have to dig deep, kind of in the middle or at the end of the race, that's ultimately what's going to determine your finish time, not your physical fitness, because the mind will quit first. And so what we really want to talk about today is ways that you can dial into your the mental fitness, I guess we can call it, and ways that you can learn to control the mind when you're in discomfort. And I think this also comes with, honestly, pain tolerance as well. I'm going to tack that on to mental over physical, because learning how to hurt is also a big differentiator in how you're going to perform.
Yeah, people talk about it all the time. The pain cave.
The pain cave,
it's very popular in our space. People talk about sitting in the pain cave,
and you have to who's good at being in the pain cave.
Exactly.
I describe people that way when I talk about Jesse, who we've mentioned a couple of times, the owner of our gym,
the goat.
Top athlete for Canada. And whenever I talk about Jesse, I feel like one of the first things I say is, that man can really sit in the pain cave.
He can sit in it better.
He has
than
a
anyone.
deep pain cave, and it's a compliment. It's difficult to do, and it doesn't just happen. It's something that you work on over time, and you have to build that muscle the same way you do physical fitness.
I think a good way to think about it, and kind of our core idea here, is that the physical fitness is the example of your ceiling. But without the mental fortitude and the mental strength and the execution, you will not reach that ceiling.
Totally.
And that's an important distinction. Is like you have to be dialed in on that aspect of the race. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. Like, for a perfect example was High Rocks Toronto for me last year. My mental game wasn't the strongest it's ever been, despite the fact that my physical fitness was
like
probably
the fittest
I've ever been. And I wasn't able to execute on the day and thus not display the fitness because my mental game was weak on the day.
Yeah.
And it just shows the influence that I actually ended up running 3 minutes slower than the race I had run, the exact same race a year before.
Yeah. I mean, similar to me with Houston last week, where I just collapsed mentally. And, you know, we'll talk about our races this past weekend in Miami, but I had a way better showing in that race. And yes, it was a different race. It was doubles, but it's not like my fitness changed that much. But I just felt stronger. I felt like mentally I was able to, you know, lock in a bit more. And so it really got us thinking about how that is a big thing that people should focus on, especially for anyone who does have a race coming up. I know we're kind of scratching the surface on spring race season for all the runners out there. Obviously, there's like High Rocks race every weekend. So to whoever's racing soon, like, this is the exact right time to start thinking about how you are going to approach the race mentally. Because yes, you can still get some fitness gains, of course, but we're kind of approaching like peak week for a lot of races now. And so you are going to have a bit more time as you taper to dedicate to like the mental side of things and, you know, really visualize the race and how you're going to fight through some of those demons that will come. If you're doing the race right, you will probably want to quit. I think
we are going to debrief our prior weekend in High Rocks Happy Hour, which will be being released on Thursday, so we won't get into the details too deeply about Miami. But yeah, you're right. There was some times during that race where I was feeling it for sure, and it's hard.
It is hard.
It's hard, and you got to dig deep. And you know, there are points where you want to quit, and you really have to calm down the voices inside that want you to quit. And the best athletes are able to do that. A great way to think about this is that your fitness will get you to the start line, but your mental strength and the way you're able to sit in that discomfort is ultimately what will decide your finish time.
Exactly. I remember that actually from my 2 High Rocks races last fall, Toronto and Vancouver. I, outside of my 2-minute penalty for going in and out the wrong way, the difference between my finishing time was around 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And that was almost the exact difference of time in my wall balls in Toronto being 5:11 and my wall balls in Vancouver being like 4:44. And so that's, for those who aren't aware, wall balls, it's the last station of the race. And I remember in Vancouver, I was like, I saw my watch. I knew what time I was, you know, hovering around. And I knew deep down, I'm like, if I don't lock in mentally for this station, I'm not going to PR today. And I knew that was the difference maker for me. So that was mental. Like that decided my PB that day. If I could suffer through, you know, a few more wall balls without putting the ball down. In Toronto, I like completely buckled under that station. So,
I mean, we've all had those moments in that station as well.
Like, yeah, it's the last kilometer of a race. It's the last, you know, final push. It's really difficult. So, you know, the more you race, the more you flex that muscle, practice going through it. But I think something that we both really appreciate is looking to the pros, oftentimes just, you know, and what they do, how they approach some of this sort of stuff. And that's the really reality of racing when you think about how an elite does it.
Of course. And there are a ton of examples of athletes who are really high performers who have a lot of thoughts on this. I mean, one of the most prominent ones is your boy David Goggins, who
He's
is
some
actually
good. He's some good motivation on a hard day. I won't lie.
he's kind of a meme in the way that he presents the information.
Very aggressive.
It's insanely aggressive, and he's kind of like, if you don't want to do the work, F you, and it's very in your face.
It is. I
But
know.
he's undeniably been able to. You want to talk about guys who can sit in it. This guy just runs, ultra marathons in the Sahara Desert, and basically, if you want to read his whole story, you can probably find it on Instagram. He's written books. He does the whole thing. But he basically went from a couch potato to a Navy SEAL who runs ultra marathons through the desert. So the ultimate life transition for him. He is probably the team captain of dig deep and push through pain.
Yeah, it's really mind over matter, and he embodies that seemingly every day. I think he also talks about sometimes he has like these crazy injuries and he's just like, no pain, no gain. It's very, I don't agree with everything he says, but
it's an example of the mentality being strong. Obviously, he's a good example of that. We're not saying that we support all of his ideology as athletes that do prioritize longevity and training, mental health, and obviously physical health. I don't think you need to just be pushing through injuries just because, but...
And so thinking about a more balanced way to look at it is Kipchoge, the GOAT marathoner. He is the sub 2 hour marathon runner, unofficial world. It's not a world record, but he, he practices sitting in pain.
What was the reasoning for that, by the way? Because he did run a sub 2 hour marathon, but I guess the conditions for something
it doesn't meet the criteria for a world record because he had such exact pacing and nutrition. He was fully surrounded by the kind of diamond of pacers the entire way, removing
air resistance,
and it was enough support that got him over the line, even if it's just a fraction of a second that you save per kilometer.
You're talking about splitting
seconds. They had to get under the 2 hours. So I'm sure we'll see it by someone at some point in a real race. But for now, he's the GOAT in that regard. He'll always be the GOAT.
He's always viewed as the GOAT, regardless of whether or not the world records recognize that effort. The fact that he can run a 2 hour marathon with people running in a diamond around him or not is something that they used to think was physiologically impossible.
Yes. And I'll say this. I think that at that level of athlete, I do believe that the mental strength is what separates him from the competition, because it's not necessarily that he's that much more physically fit than his competitors. But when you hear him talk about how he approaches pain and the discipline around that and the discipline in his mind, he has so many great quotes. I think one of them is to live a disciplined life is a free life. And to learn how to sit in the pain, that's where you see success. And the true, not just athletes, but the true people who are successful know how to sit in that pain. And something he's talked about too is that a tactic he uses is that he will smile when he starts to feel pain, really deep in the pain cave, because it's a way to trick your body that you're not actually in pain if you're kind of forcing yourself to smile. So I actually used to do that. I'm now saying it out loud. I should really bring it back. But
I saw some grimaces from some pictures and
I can't. My photos are awful. The only place I seem to smile is on the row, but I'll post my photos from the Miami race. They are hilarious. I look like I'm in an SOS, and I'm just like, Lindsay, you have to save me.
There's some good content coming from that, so wait for that drop. And just a reminder, if you know somebody that's going to be racing soon, if they're trying to get mentally prepared for the race, or if they've just struggled with that aspect, share this episode with them. Share them our Instagram at aerobicafpod. We're on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. So fire this over to them if they need some help with understanding the mental aspects of the race. Another athlete that we are quite big fans of, he's very loud, is
Very
Hunter
loud.
McIntyre. This guy's also one of the goats of the mindset. Like, he
Yeah.
basically goes into races feeling like he's the best, knowing that his training backs up that he's the best, that he's unapologetic about it. And basically it's like, just do the work or STFU.
Yeah.
And but he backs it up with his performance, which I think is mandatory if you're going to be the loudest person in the field.
Totally. Yeah. And he looks very controlled when he's racing.
He looks very intimidating.
Very intimidating. He's a big presence for sure. But even just kind of watching him on some different live streams and seeing videos on Instagram, you can tell that he is comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that's one of the biggest differentiators. Yeah, differentiators between the average athlete and an elite athlete is they are able to tap into just this other kind of state of being. And I mean, I'll actually quote one of my best friends, Pippa, who was a varsity rower for all her life. And one of my mantras that I still use is something she said to me once. It was, you need to accept that being uncomfortable is your new state of normal when you're racing. Like, you should not expect to feel good. You just need to lean in to the pain and the discomfort that comes with that. And it's such a key mindset shift, because oftentimes you hear people talk about, oh, the first half of a marathon, it's supposed to feel easy. And the first, X amount of time in a high rocks, you should feel pretty controlled, and then you can send it after this station. But the reality is that you're not going to feel that great when you're racing. Like, yes, relatively, you should be pacing it and, not blowing up, but it is a very different, state that your body and your mind are entering.
Lauren Weeks is another one of our favorites. She always comes up a lot in these conversations. I think that one thing that she does really well is she looks always so composed, to your points. Like, she seems to be out there just leaving opponents in the dust on these runs, and is just looking so calm.
It looks like she's really good at being aggressive off the jump and holding that. Like, you don't really see her fade. Even if other athletes are passing her, like in the latter half of the race, she is still pressing and has her foot on the gas. And, even after watching her race with Dylan Scott in Houston last weekend, they got a really bad sled push lane. Like, it was quite egregious.
Devastating.
It was hard to watch. I was like, oh God, this looks really bad. And then when they left the station, you just see Lauren not miles ahead, but way ahead of Dylan, just still pressing really hard. And what I appreciate about that is that, they were there to go for the world record. I think they both knew at sled push, and they admitted this after the fact. They knew that they weren't going to get the record, after that lane. It was, we're talking about 30, margins, 40 seconds. Like, you can't make that up on the other stations when it's so close. But they did not let that stop them from continuing to press as hard as they could for the rest of the race. And again, that's the difference between an elite athlete and an average athlete, where it didn't matter that they got something that threw a complete wrench in their plan. Like, they still went out so hard and kept pushing to the end, which got them within 10 seconds of the world record, which is actually incredibly impressive because their sled push was so slow. And so it also goes to show you that it is not over until it's over. So even if you make a mistake early on in the race or something happens, you deserve and you owe it to yourself to continue to lock in and not let up, because you don't know what will happen. I actually think that Ryan Douglas had a similar experience in Houston where something happened on the sleds. Also, the sleds in Houston seem to be very bad for a lot of athletes. I've seen a lot of posts about it, but I think since his race in DC did not go as well, it appeared as though he like continued to just push and stay consistent and steady, and he ended up having like an incredible race, running like a 56 something. And so that also goes to show that like you really do owe it to yourself to continue to stay locked in. And we know it's so hard to do mentally because we've both been there and we've both, failed to do so as well. So it's easier said than done. But, I think it's helpful when I hear stories about how people overcame something difficult early on and still ended up having like a really good day.
How do you handle the start line nerves? Because I feel like that's the beginning of where the mental battle starts. I mean, we could talk about race day prep,
Yeah.
but you can definitely feel those butterflies in your stomach when you're getting into the warm-up zone right before you're about to, whether you're in the pen, like for a road running race when everybody gets all together, or in the start tunnel for a high rocks race. How do you handle the mental nerves?
A lot of positive self-talk. I tell myself, like, you've got this, you can do this. And I also like to stand like Superwoman. I think that's
Oh,
helpful.
yeah?
Yeah.
Hands on the hips?
Yeah, there's science behind it that shows when you stand like a Superwoman, I'm doing it right now, it gives your body confidence. So I do that when I'm actually on the start line in the start tunnel. Take some deep breaths and just, remind myself that I've been here before, that I know it's going to hurt, but I can, suffer, and I've done that. So also, taking it in to an extent, like I think some nerves should be channeled in like an excited, energetic way that's not all like, oh my God, like you try to channel it in a way that's productive energy, not anxiety. I've definitely been on some start lines where I've been a bit more fearful, but yeah, I think just trying to stand confident, stand proud, start kind of reciting some of your mantras to yourself just to get the mental, honestly, the mental part flowing, just like lock in and just remind myself of my training. I think like I'm not someone who necessarily proves my fitness in training sessions leading up to a race. I really need to trust that what I've done is going to allow me to execute what I want to do. And so I have that in my back pocket as well, just kind of maybe running through a handful of key sessions that I nailed and reminding myself that my body knows how to do it.
I think I always try to focus on making sure that the nerves that I'm feeling are actually excitement about the opportunity to race and framing it like that.
I like that a lot.
Rather than framing it as like anxiety or a negative emotion. I think that matters a lot. For me personally, for sure. And I think that shift has been very helpful.
Yeah, great.
Because it can be, you've got those butterflies and you can interpret that in a number of ways. And I think the biggest shift for me was like, yeah, I'm excited about the opportunity to display the fitness today. And just understanding that, yes, that it's going to be hard. And especially for me, I think sometimes early in these races, it can take a little time for me to get my engine up and running. It often doesn't feel like that. It's really going for the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes sometimes.
No, you got to warm up more.
Well, maybe, but I don't know. I think
We've talked
about this a lot. Even sometimes in workouts where I'll do a 4K warm up, the first rep is my hardest rep, and the 8th rep I've really settled into my flow state. So it's sometimes I think we talk about it. It's like, oh, there's things that you need to do. I think I just know that it's going to be hard for me in the beginning, and I'll settle into the effort, and it will get easier for me as the race goes along.
Well, that's
once
great.
I find that gear. So for me, mentally, it's just understanding that yes, it's going to be painful, but I can just work through. I just have to push through the momentary pain and like find the calmness, and that will like persevere, and then it kind of hopefully negates some of those mid-race doubts that we were talking about. If a station hits that doesn't go well or whatever it is that might happen. I mean, anything can happen in a race.
Yeah, you could get a cramp. Like I cramped up in Miami, and I remember just being like, oh God, I do not have time for this cramp. because sometimes the cramp can feel quite debilitating when you're running, but I just kind of put it, I was like, out of sight, out of mind. I'm not going to feed this. I'm not going to think about it. And it just kind of went away.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of ways that the doubt can creep in. And especially if you're someone that has like a lingering or nagging injury, oftentimes when you experience pain in a race, it can spark a nerve of like, oh my God, am I going to injure myself if I keep going? So I do think it's important to have a distinction of the type of pain you're supposed to be feeling. And so, yeah, to anyone who is
there is a difference
racing,
from what we're talking about, by the way. We're not talking about like knee pain when you're racing.
It can be hard sometimes to tell the difference. And
yes.
Also, like I've definitely had moments where I'm like, well, what if I just stop racing because I don't want to hurt myself? But that gave me an out that I didn't need, you know? Like it can be sometimes a dangerous little thought pattern of like, well, this is a good excuse not to finish this really, really hard thing.
Yeah. And to be clear, like what I'm saying is if you are feeling like pain in your knee and you might have like actually an injury, there's no, like you think it's like actually an injury, then there obviously is a threshold where it's like you should remove yourself from the race. But also understands that like sometimes I'll be going into a race and something will just start to feel a little bit off. That often happens for me on race morning. I'll start to feel like some pain in my shoulder or my ankle will start to feel a little bit sore. And I think it's just the nerves of the race.
Some
just
of it's normal.
in. Or if you're in a taper week, sometimes towards the end, your body starts to feel
a little
not
thing
really that
pops
great.
Up. Yeah, it's totally normal. And I think something that helps in your training is doing those really hard sessions so that you, like as I talked about before, I kind of
really agree with this.
I think back to the key sessions that went really well, and oftentimes they are a run workout or a long run workout where I had to really lean into the pain and discomfort of the reps and what I was doing. And that gives me confidence that I can do that in a race. Like I want to feel like I overcame quitting in training in order to do it on race day. And admittedly, I don't think I've had that many of those sessions in the last few months since it's just been different things have been prioritized this block. And I think that's one of the reasons why in Houston, I just couldn't find it because I hadn't really had it for a while. So that's something I'm personally going to do more of is like a longer tempo/threshold effort where it is 20-30 minutes long and I kind of just have to lock in and get it done.
I think that's a natural progression. We'll talk about structuring more specifically of run workouts probably in a later episode and kind of how we structure that. Thresholds versus tempos versus
there's
like
different
speed.
Intentions.
There's a lot of ways to get there.
Yeah, different intentions behind different workouts. And for this specific like mental fortitude,
you're talking about just finding a workout where you have to sit in it.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily like you need to be pushing max heart rate, but it should be a similar race effort. Like in a marathon, maybe it's like high zone 3, low zone 4, or for high rocks, it's like high zone 4, low zone 5, like whatever your race demands of you, practicing a little bit of that in training so you have the confidence that you can do it. And it doesn't need to look like a time trial or anything like that. It can just be the pure focus and intention is sitting in that pain. And yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to, closing the gaps in some of these things. I also think it's one of the reasons why racing can be helpful as a tool to learn, because you figure out what has been going well in training and how that showed up on race day, and maybe what you've been lacking in training and what you need to close the gap with.
One thing that I find is sometimes I get into almost like a fear. I'm almost like can get like afraid that I'm going to push too hard in the race, and that sometimes can actually like hold you back. And I find
you think you're gonna
overextend
And blow up.
Yeah, I think that sometimes you can hesitate, but I do think a key part of that is kind of understanding that that might be where your mentality is and not reacting to that, and just making sure that you're actually settled in on your RPE, and which is the rate of perceived exertion, and understanding where your body and your fitness is. One thing that's really helped me do this, I think, is actually been practicing mindfulness.
Yes, please share with the group what has been your mindfulness journey.
I mean, we're on a pretty good heater right now. I think I'm on 70 days now where I've meditated every day for that stretch. You're also on quite a streak as well.
I am.
By association.
Yeah, I think I'm at 60 days. I'm just a bit behind you.
That's great. That's almost 2 full months, and at that point, it's basically an established habit. This is something that was near and dear for me without going too far down this road. When I was a little bit younger, I had some times where I kind of was suffering from a pretty deep depression. And I just wasn't really sure. I was lacking direction. I was lacking a lot of self-confidence, self-esteem. It was just not really a great time. It was probably in my early 20s. This is when I first got into mindfulness, because that was one of the biggest tools that helped me untangle that web. And a lot of what I found was that I was causing a lot of my own suffering by not checking in, as we do, by not checking in on the way that I was actually treating myself with my own thoughts. And
yeah, thoughts are so powerful. So
they can be.
You need to be able to control them.
Exactly. And it's like, you're thinking about this stuff, and it's like, I would never say this to like a close friend of mine.
I know.
But these narratives are just like building in your head and just becoming so toxic. And it was a disaster. So ultimately I ended up finding mindfulness, started practicing meditation, started practicing like journaling, doing all that sort of stuff. And actually really like turned everything around. I mean, it takes time. It's not
how long do you think if you were to go back?
Oh, I don't know. It's probably maybe about at least like a year and a half or 2 years before I really like settled back into feeling like myself fully.
Good reminder that it doesn't happen overnight.
No, because I think that mental fitness is the same as physical fitness. It's not something that you can just change. You can't just change your thought patterns overnight. You actually have to put in the time. In this case, it's just the time of sitting and breathing and becoming aware of your thoughts. And it can be really distressful or put yourself in a lot of distress when you're first going down that road, because it can be really scary looking at all this sort of stuff in the mirror. But ultimately being able to do that, now translates really well into fitness, because I do think that I am able to settle down my mind. And I actually think that being more aware helps me be more present when I am feeling those stressors. And I can actually now observe that discomfort without panicking. Which inherently also helps me control my emotions more in the race when I am sitting in those pain caves. And I actually have thought that this is one of the main reasons that I've gotten back into it. I think it's the biggest boost I can give myself at this stage in my progression. Obviously, physical fitness continues to build, but if I can sharpen up the mental game, which I do by meditation and have been doing every day, I really feel like that gives me an edge over my competition, that I'm training that part of my mind to be able to sit in that and stay calmer. And also physiologically, I've noticed my heart rate is lower in
I was going to say, I think it helps. It helps not just with like the race day mentality and discomfort and sitting with that, but it probably really aids in recovery as well, because your nervous system is more relaxed and you're able to control those thoughts and feelings and emotions really on a day-to-day, which all contribute to the amount of stress that you're experiencing. And obviously when you are working out a lot, that puts stress on the body, on the mind. So I've found that it actually makes me calmer as an individual on the day-to-day. And then that translates into like better recovery scores. I think it's one of the reasons why I think my HRV actually has quite good variance, because that's something that wasn't always the case. And meditation is one of the only things I've really changed about my schedule and my training routine. So yeah, I think it's a lever that all athletes, and I mean everyone should do it, but athletes especially, I think you deserve and owe it to yourself to flex that muscle and practice it. So yeah, I love it.
Really great. So how this shows up in the race is you will be feeling fatigue, but you don't start to spiral as quickly because you are noticing the negative thoughts. And rather than noticing those thoughts that are saying, I'm tired, I'm sore, I want to stop, you don't attach to them. You just let them go and just can then reassess actually and say the stuff that some of the mantras that we always think about. You know, you've been here before, you know how to sit in this. It's like you can kind of reflect on sessions that you've had that give you that positive vibe. Like, oh, I had this session, you know, this interval workout recently where I was running a faster pace than this, so I can definitely run that pace now. Like these sorts of things really help keep you grounded in that moment and control those emotional spikes that can happen mid-race. And so by not allowing that to take over the narrative, it can really help you. Simple ways to implement this, I mean, the way that we do it is basically by doing a 5 to 10 minute breathing exercise where we just sit, follow the breath. We have timers.
Yeah, it's not like
it's not super complicated.
Yeah, you don't even need it to be guided. Like I used to do a lot of guided meditation, but sometimes that led to being inconsistent because I spent so much time trying to find like on the app what meditation I wanted to do and
it's like
how many
minutes.
Trying
to find something to watch on Netflix.
Literally.
You spend an hour trying to decide on what show and then you fall asleep 15
yeah,
minutes
then
in.
I would just be like, okay, I can't really find what I want. I'll just do it later. And then I would never do it later. So yeah, I think this is something that's available to everyone. And I'll now do it, even if sometimes a couple times in the day. I don't really do it longer than 10 minutes personally. I mean, we could probably do a whole episode on meditation, actually.
Surely we could. But yeah, in the context of mentality and racing, it's like this definitely has helped
Breathing
both of us,
helps
I think.
Breathing too.
For sure. And that's something that you can also always return to in the race efforts. It's something that I have actually more recently started doing is just actually counting my breaths while I'm in the effort.
I heard you say this the other day to someone. What did you said something like, I just count to 200. And I'm like, this is so funny. That's so high.
I know. It's like, it takes me about 170 breaths to run 1 kilometer, which is more or less around 3 minutes and 40 seconds.
Don't kill me.
170.
That's so funny.
So I just count to that and everything else just stops. I just don't think about anything. I just am following my breath and just
busy counting reps and not laps.
That's hey, listen. You laugh, but I actually ran my race this weekend, which is the next point that we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
I ran it with no watch, which means I had no distance, I had no lap time, I had no anything. And it was the most calm and most controlled I've ever felt in any race that I've ever run.
I love that.
Every pace was within about 3 seconds of my threshold outside of run 2, which was quite a bit faster. The rest of them were all within 3 seconds with no data. And I think that's awesome. Like an amazing revelation about how tech can positively influence your training. I think it's very useful there. I don't think it's always necessary in the race. We've discussed this in the past. I think that was a big reason that you got a wrench thrown into your Houston race and your mentality was because of watch screens that were erroneous, that were showing you data that you didn't know what it meant and perceived it incorrectly. And actually, I think that was one of the biggest mental hurdles that you faced in that race.
The longer I think about my Houston race, the more it's clear to me that there were a number of things that went wrong, and that is a really big one, actually. The watch, I do rely on it for, some key data points, but that was such a mistake to let that, get to me in that way. And it's one of the reasons, too, that oftentimes in a half marathon or marathon, I change the face that I see so I don't see distance or pace, because I just don't want to know. I'll give myself, I can look at the time and whatever. If I feel like doing mental math when I hit 18 kilometers, I can do that. But yeah, I think it's awesome that you did the race without a watch. And it's something I think about in my solo race as something I think I might want to try in Ottawa because, yeah, just you. I don't know. It can be really tough to not let the data get to you.
I think in the High Rocks race it can be devastating. It's like for
Yeah.
because for example, it's like we had a really hard push and a really hard pull in this race over the past weekend. And I think if you're just collecting data and looking at the paces, it would be enough to say, well, the race is over. We had a crappy pull, we had a crappy push, like RIP, shut it down. But because I knew that, well, I obviously knew that it was a hard one, and I knew that wasn't going to be our fastest time out there. We're going to talk about this later. But it's just interesting. I think that having that information sometimes can be entirely demoralizing, and actually even the strongest mental athletes, if you're having these negative feedback from your tech, it can just undermine everything that you're doing on the day.
Everything else. And
pulls you out of the moment. It causes panic. This is exactly what happened for you. It's like you saw the pacing on your watch in Houston, and it just pulls you completely out of the moment and completely out of your zone.
And yeah, something I feel like I'm really good at is knowing what a certain pace feels like. And it's crazy that even knowing that, I still doubted it because of what my watch was saying or how I interpreted the data. So yeah, I do think that, we did an episode, one of our first episodes or early on was about
Your
the
tech
GPS
gaslighting you.
watch. Yeah. So if you're curious on our other thoughts on that, definitely check out that episode. We have, probably more thoughts on it now the more we race and kind of learn about how it can help and hinder you. But
I think in training it can be very useful, but honestly in the race environment, like I would run without it. For sure in High Rocks specifically.
Maybe I'll run I have a 10K in like a few weeks. Maybe I'll run that watch list. That might be an interesting experiment because, yeah, I don't really know on it. I actually don't know what I'm going to do that day in terms of racing because I'm not going to be fully tapered for it. So I probably should go watch list and just go by feel.
Yeah, just settle into the effort naturally. You can just feel the race and settle into your pacing. I mean, you want to talk about your boy, Kipchoge is one of the biggest advocates of running.
Does he
by
not run?
feel
He doesn't
over
run with
numbers.
a watch?
He just talks about it a lot, like running over feel, over running.
Oh, sure.
Like over numbers or like finding the rhythm rather than relying on the data.
Flow state.
Exactly. And I think that actually having more information can sometimes be more detrimental to your effort on the day.
Yeah. So I guess, maybe just to recap then, for anyone who, you've made it this far, now you're like, okay, well, what now? What do I do to, be that version of myself that is mentally prepared, that is strong mentally, that is not giving into the demons and the doubts on race day? Well, we will list out all of the things that you can do to make sure that you are very prepped for your next race.
Yeah. Well, I think that just training mental strength, we talk about doing it in your training. Just make sure that you're controlling the discomfort. Like, don't let it feel like it's too much. If you are training properly, you will have felt this feeling before on the race day.
Yeah. Make sure
you can settle into that.
Make sure you're putting yourself in a position in training where you want to quit and you overcome that in training. And again, it does not mean that you need to go to the well and be like 100% max effort, but you should be feeling this on a weekly basis to build that muscle.
Remove escape routes. You don't want to be giving yourself options to quit.
Yeah, don't give yourself an out.
I think this is the most slippery slope. If you do this even one time, it gives yourself permission to do it every time after that.
Yeah.
Like, I've never quit an effort or quit. Like, I've never like quit a workout or quit like an effort. There's races that I DNF'd because of like injury or whatever. It's like I've never just said I don't have it today, so I'm not gonna quit, or so I'm just gonna stop. It's like you have to train yourself to push through that discomfort, even on days where it feels like it might not be your best. Just get through it.
Yeah, and again, doing that in training will give you more confidence that you can do it on race day. I think sometimes what can happen in the moment in a race is that you start to think about the excuses or the rationale for why you're not going to hit your goal, and that can be another dangerous like escape route. So, you know, try to visualize succeeding and achieving your goal even when there's moments of doubt that you're going to get there. There's always a shot, and you sometimes get a second wind, or you take your gel and that hits you positively, and you find another gear and you can dig deep. Like, it is oftentimes with these endurance races, like, they're long. A lot can transpire over that period of time. So just don't give yourself an out early on. Stick through it.
I think one thing that's kind of a polarizing one is race simulations in your training. I think you have to be honest with what kind of athlete you are in this circumstance. Because I think there are two kinds of athletes. I think there are athletes that follow the block and follow their training and understands that on race day, regardless of what they're doing, they trust in the work that they've been putting in, and they'll have the effort available on race day. Mm-hmm. And then there are athletes that need to see it. They need the results on paper. They need to see that the speed is building. They need to have those efforts in there to give them confidence that it will be there. I am generally the former. I trust that the training is going to show up. I don't need a number in a simulation as much to make me feel like I'm going to be able to perform on race day. But we have friends that really enjoy doing simulations to gauge and see where they're at.
Yeah, we have lots of friends who've done them recently. And
a bunch. And I'm not saying that it's not useful information, but understand what kind of athlete you are. If you're the kind of athlete that needs a positive affirmation and needs a gauge of where you're at to feel confident, make sure you are mixing these in, because they can be extremely great litmus tests of where you're at physically.
I think the only thing to be cautious with here is that you are trading this for a session, like a training session, because it's going to be a hard effort, probably one of your hardest ones of the week. And I think it was a podcast we were listening to recently. I wish I could quote it and give some credit there. I want to say it was the RMR podcast, but they were talking about how it can be detrimental to do a full sim, or even, I guess, time trial for running, because you're not getting the stimulus you need. Like, it'd be better, time would be better spent at threshold or doing shorter bouts of training.
So like, I think instead of running a 5K effort all out, you would be better running 5 by 1K.
Or whatever, like an interval training session that will actually train the adaptation that you need
without
to
denting
perform
in your
well.
Muscles.
Yes. So I think that it's something to be careful with maybe you want to have one before your goal race if you don't have the opportunity to have like a big goal race on the calendar. And being just really intentional and knowing that you're doing this instead of something else, basically.
We talk about the self-talk. This part's pretty self-explanatory. Be nice to yourself in your own narrative that you're spinning in your mind in the race. It will go a long way if you're feeling positive and you have the positive vibes flowing inside. As soon as that negativity takes hold, it can really derail you.
Yeah, it's like, pretend that you're cheering for yourself during the race. What would you say to your friend if you were cheering them on?
Yeah.
Like, say that.
Actually, one trick that our friend Steve Magnus, who wrote the book on basically mentality in sports.
Yeah.
One thing that he always talks about is talking to yourself in the third person.
Oh,
and it
he
can
does
kind of
say
give
that.
you encouragement. So for me, it would be, "Come on, Ken, you got this." And it sounds sort of tacky and sort of cheesy,
so funny.
but it works.
Yeah.
And so just kind of reframing it and not being even like a little shift from "I've got this" to "Come on, you've got this." It almost tricks your mind into thinking that someone's there cheering for you, which can help you dig a little bit deeper. And it's just these small tricks that sometimes maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. But give it a try, see what's going on.
It's worth finding exactly that. What works for you, what you best respond to. And again, I'll come back to it, is that you have to practice this during training, because that is going to continue to build and flex that mental muscle. So as much as you want to train your physical fitness, just make sure you're also prioritizing sessions that force you to, build mental fitness too.
Yeah. And make sure you're detaching emotion from like that pain cave or like the hard effort that you're feeling. Because it's not the same thing. And you'll try to convince yourself of a lot of things when your body gets into that state where it's a fight or flight. Ideally, where you want to get to is where you can sit in that fight response and continue to push through for yourself and show up for yourself in that way. You don't want to be convincing yourself that you need to pull back or retreat when you start to feel that discomfort.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not supposed to be easy. These races are hard. We talk about it all the time. Like
I
if
know.
it were easy to run a marathon, or if it were easy to run a fast high rocks time,
Everyone would do it.
Everyone would do it. It's not. They're hard races, and it's going to be uncomfortable. And you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, our new favorite line. Yeah, I think just reminding yourself that this is supposed to be hard is helpful as well. That's something that I yell that when I'm cheering for people too. I'm like, it's supposed to hurt, so just lean into that. And that it's helpful of like, it's a reason why people congratulate you after doing it, because it is really difficult, and it's a huge accomplishment and feat just to like get to a start line healthy and get to perform. But really the fitness, the amount of fitness that you can display is ultimately going to come down to how much mental fitness you have available on the day.
And I think another important distinction is, in the beginning, obviously your fitness does matter. If you're a newer athlete, like you're going to need to be in the gym, you're going to need to working on those sessions. Like obviously there is a threshold where you can't just show up after training for 3 months and expect to have a fast time. Fitness is built over time.
Yeah.
We're more talking about when you hit a certain threshold, the mentality starts to matter a lot more than the fitness itself.
Yeah.
And that threshold is kind of like when you start getting into that more advanced athletes who have been doing this for a longer time. Like you need to make sure that's mega dialed.
Yeah, because ultimately we're talking about seconds here that you're looking to shave. Even just like 1 minute it can feel very intimidating. And so, it's really where it's like, how much do you want to suffer for it?
Yeah. And I think, I don't really have a whole ton to add.
I know. I feel like we've talked a lot about this. I think it's something we're going to come back to, especially as we both have a couple of races still lined up in the coming 2 months. So, looking forward to kind of put this into practice, I guess.
Yeah. I think the main takeaway for me is that your next breakthrough actually might come through mental fortitude and execution of a good race plan, because you're mentally strong, rather than you having some sort of huge fitness breakthrough.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I don't have anything else. I think we're going to take a little pause and then probably get back to some race recaps that I think Ken alluded to. You can look forward to that.
Happy Hour dropping this Thursday.
In a couple days. So we're excited to bring you on that journey of our continued racing in this hybrid fitness world. And until then,
stay aerobic AF.